Thanks so much you're in Austin right now, I
I'm
know.
in Austin.
And, you know, I was saying that for people who aren't in Texas, I think it's hard for us to understand and fully appreciate how difficult this is, you know, for the people in Texas. So I just wanted you to give us a quick update on what's going on, the areas affected, and what the big issues are now.
Sure. So first of all, every single 254 counties in the state of Texas have been affected. As of today, Governor Greg Abbott gave a press conference and a big update this afternoon, and 2 million people, which is a big chunk of people in the state, are now with power. We had gotten up to a peak of at least upwards of 2.7 million people had been without power since Monday evening or Sunday overnight into Monday. So that is, 4 days of people.
I misunderstood. 2 million people are without power.
The peak was 2.7. As of today, 2 million now have power restored.
So it's 700,000 still don't?
He said 325,000. I'm not sure exactly what the delta is there, but hundreds of thousands of people are still without power. According to the governor, those are people who were not without power because of the issues with the power grid, but people who lost power due to subsequent issues with the icing and the power lines down and just issues with their access being cut off at the local level. So according to the state, the major sort of crisis with the state grid that we've gotten through, and now, I mean, a lot of, first of all, hundreds of thousands of people still without power. We shifted from everyone being told to weatherize, prepare, to drip faucets, to try to make sure that, your houses were as equipped as possible, not for pipes not to burst, and then a reversal here in the last day to stop dripping faucets to conserve water, because now water treatment plants are having power issues, and a lack of pressure, which has led to boil water notices that are affecting 14 million people in the state without access to clean potable water. So if you can imagine how that's impacting, the elderly, families, parents with babies who need formula and need to have water, but you have power out potentially, and how are you going to boil water? I mean, it has felt like a week of Mad Max, of just problem solving from one crisis to the next for so many people.
So right now, the biggest issue is some of the water is contaminated and people have to boil it because of issues with the electrical system and water pumps. Is that accurate?
Power plants that needed power to basically pump and treat the water were out of power. And so as those systems come back online, they need time to retest the water to make sure that any potential contamination is resolved and that it's safe and ready to go again for people to consume at the tap.
So how is FEMA helping? What is the federal response been, and what is the state response been? I have someone saying that Biden's doing nothing, who is on this part of this conversation. And let's get the facts out.
Okay, so the Texas has declared a state of emergency last weekend in preparation. Abbott has deployed National Guard to help get people into warming centers. There are more than 300 warming centers across the state, just to get people into a place with power and warmth and access to food and water. He asked the federal government today for additional aid from FEMA, so that, I mean, it feels like a hurricane. Texas is used to being prepared for epic flash flooding and hurricanes and weather damage from that sort of thing, and filing claims after the fact. So to FEMA after things have been declared a disaster. So Abbott is asking now for the federal government to step in and provide more of that kind of relief, so that as people get back into their houses and are assessing the damage from pipes being burst, that they're able to kind of make claims to FEMA to get, repairs underway for what is going to be probably an extraordinary amount of damage to residences and businesses and people who, just got caught with frozen pipes and are coming back to that after all of this.
Can you talk, and someone said, I'm in Austin, hospitals here don't have water. I know that's a huge problem. I'm trying, I'm torn. People say term off the comments, but I think that it's good to hear from people in Texas. So I'm going to keep them on for a little.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah. A few hospitals have been caught without water. Obviously, that's an issue. They're literally handing out bottles of water in hospitals for people to wash up with and drink, trying to evacuate patients or get patients that can be discharged and into, it's hard to imagine when a hospital isn't safe and you're trying to discharge patients to get someplace safer, but that's just the state that we're in.
so they're trying to get people out of hospitals so they can go. To explain that again. I'm sorry, Amanda.
Just that in some cases where they're able to discharge patients who are not in need, they're trying to kind of minimize the load on hospitals so that, you know, they're not having to, have people there who don't absolutely need to be there without having clean water for them.
But
Take care of them.
they don't want to send them home where it might be freezing, right? And they might be in a terrible situation, especially
that's the conundrum. I mean, of all of the stats, I mean, we know we've talked about the stats in terms of people without power and people now facing, you know, compromised water, and, you know, 18 people now confirmed death since Sunday, but it's an untold number of people who are currently still displaced, who don't have a place to be, or who were evacuated and are sort of in this interim limbo. Yeah.
And this is going on, Amanda, since Monday. And can you explain simply about the electric grid?
Oh gosh, let me pull up my notes here. Yes, ma'am. All right, so
Texas got into this situation in the first place.
First of all, what people may or may not know is that Texas has its own grid system, and that's because it's not subject to the same federal oversight that other grid systems are, and Texas wants it that way. And so ERCOT is what it's called, the Electric Reliability Council of Texas. They're a nonprofit, and they basically manage the flow of power from, you know, energy resources, gas, coal, nuclear, and some green sources to the local power companies or local utilities. And what happened is 1:25 a.m., and they had warned that this would potentially be an issue, and they were trying to urge Texans to conserve power going into this weekend. At 1:25 on Monday morning, so, you know, Sunday we went to bed from Valentine's, and the pictures were people like it's a novelty, there's snow and people are out and playing with their kids, turned into people waking up to not having power. And ERCOT implemented these controlled outages. They were meant to last anywhere from 10 minutes to 45 minutes and to be distributed. And they were on a rolling basis. And what happened was they did not roll. They became persistent. And so some people had been without power from the time that overnight outage began until today. It's insane. So ERCOT, so that was the 2 million that came back online today that the governor said was due to ERCOT stabilizing the supply demand issues. So just an extraordinary amount of demand on the system as people are trying to heat their homes. And I mean, 9 degrees in Texas is a record in my lifetime for sure. Texas simply is not necessarily built for that kind of cold. And a lot of the questions now are, what happened with these power suppliers that they were not able to consistently provide power to keep the supply up?
Right.
Were they weatherized? And those are some of the big questions. There's a lot of political football already happening this week. Abbott has made this a priority, an emergency issue with the legislature, which basically means he's fast tracking to try to figure out, what needs to happen to weatherize and modernize to make sure that these power suppliers are not put in this position again, and how much it's going to cost. That's a big question. Frankly, this happened, Texas had a big blizzard in 2011. I was not here for that. And they had the same postmortem, they had, epic outages and the same postmortem. And so I think that there's going to be a lot of questions about what was not learned a decade ago that could have been implemented in the interim. Why are we still, facing this kind of, lack of preparation for, this kind of overload on the system in the winter.
And Amanda, are people talking about extreme temperature fluctuations because the result of global warming, because
Yeah.
they expect that this kind of extreme weather is going to happen again, and
Yeah.
is actually going to become much more of a regular thing. So
Yeah.
curious about the conversations going on about that.
I mean, we're sort of right now, a lot of the conversations, frankly, are in just on the ground trying to get people safe mode, and a lot of questions at the state level about the grid. But yes, the climate question is the bigger picture question. And in Texas, you've got coastal areas that are facing historic flooding. I mean, look at Hurricane Harvey. That was supposed to be a once in a however many lifetimes. That was a very unusual storm. So you have the kind of coastal threat, and now if we're going to also have this other, extreme swing in weather, yeah, I mean, it raises major questions about our infrastructure, and not just the infrastructure itself, but how it is optimized to serve. Is it optimized to keep costs down for the state, and or is it really optimized to serve public citizens? Is it and when it's not working, who is the most affected? And as we can see, whenever these systems fail, it is almost always underserved communities of color that are bearing the brunt of a lot of these failures. And so that's another set of data. I'm sure we at the 19th are going to be looking into to see how are women and marginalized communities being disproportionately impacted by these failures.
Yeah, I know, as you said, the politics have already started, lots of finger pointing. And I'm just looking at these comments. They're interesting. Is there are people feeling that they're getting enough support from the federal government?
I don't know. I mean, again, like I had a conversation with a woman, a volunteer who works at the Austin area Urban League this afternoon. And again, her name is Yasmin Smith. And I have to tell you, because there's a bright light in all of this, and it's happening at the hyper local level, to be really frank. She said that, they were thinking about, how they could help just with dealing with, the population. There's at least, up to 10,000 people who are, who don't have housing in the city of Austin at any given time, coming into a weather event like this. And, these are the kinds of groups that are seeing this and doing something, being proactive about doing something about trying to help and serve those communities. And so I was talking to her earlier today, and she was saying they had 200 volunteers that had pulled together over the last week in Austin. They're on Zoom. They've got an open Zoom call, from 7 something in the morning to 9 at night, just trying to help field all of these requests for help. I'm also seeing it on my own Facebook pages. And so there's just a lot of this really incredible grassroots support that's happening with people seeing a need in the community and stepping up and doing something about it. So I think, bigger picture, we're still sort of waiting to see how these state and federal resources coalesce. I think probably the big next sort of wave of support is going to be homeowners who are trying to figure out how to make good on, properties that have been devastated by flooding and damage. But a lot of the kind of in the moment response is happening at a local level, and it's been really incredible to see.
Yeah, and a lot of people, this independent entity that was running the power grid didn't have to adhere to federal regulations. And as a result, I have a lot of people following this.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what can be done about that. I'm sure that you heard Rick Perry chiming in about that, I think in the last day or so, saying Texans would happily bear another, catastrophe like this just to keep, out of federal oversight. So I don't know.
That seems pretty moronic to me. Hey, speaking of federal officials, Ted Cruz created quite a brouhaha going to Cancun in the middle of all this. You know, one time I had dinner with Vladimir Putin. How weird is that? And I asked him through his translator why he didn't come back when all those Russian sailors were at the bottom of the sea dying in a submarine. And he said there was nothing he could do about it. And I said, but perception is everything. And it would have made clear to be an empathetic and caring leader. I'm like, why am I talking to Putin that way? But anyway, I did. But sort of the same thing, I think, goes to why Ted Cruz would go on a vacation to Cancun when all these people are really suffering. And it just absolutely makes no sense to me. Can you tell us what the reaction is from Texans? I know they're not monolithic, but still, are they upset and outraged by this?
Upset, outraged, I think just exhausted. And I don't know that people are necessarily surprised. I hate to say that, but like coming off of the year that we have come off of, I think there's been a lack of leadership, and people are accustomed to that lack of leadership. I hate to say, I think the opportunity was certainly there, optics aside, just to, be digging in. And that's again why I'm saying, like, at the local level, you're seeing people stepping up and pitching in and raising their hands and saying, what can I do to help? Even if I've been here also for days, and thankfully one of the people here with power, and internet. And so it is mind boggling. I think that's the best way to put it.
Yeah, it is, as the kids say, not a good look.
Not a good look. No.
And let's talk about how people can help. We just raised $8,000 for kitchen.
Incredible.
Live with somebody, which was awesome. And I know that you had said there are other that.
Yes. Okay.
Go ahead.
There's two I would mention. So the Texas Food Banks organization is trying to organize food supplies, which is really important for a couple of reasons. First of all, grocery stores are already wiped out. This is like taking us back to the beginning of the pandemic is what it feels like, except people are waiting hours outside of grocery stores in really cold temperatures. They don't have water, they don't have dairy. And in addition to that, a lot of the state producers of things like dairy, produce has been devastated by the freeze event itself. So food is going to be a major issue. So Texas Food Banks, that's feedingtexas.org, is going to be collecting donations for food.
Okay, hold on. Repeat that.
It's feedingtexas.org.
So everybody.
Their site was down earlier. If you look for them on Twitter too, they've got a campaign page that's still up to donate.
Okay.
I also mentioned the Austin Area Urban League because I think that they're doing just really great things to make sure that communities of color and the vulnerable are getting access to food and clothes and warmth and shelter. The other place that I would point you and that I've been following obsessively, because again, a lot of these resources are happening at the regional level. Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, San Antonio. If you go to the Texas Tribune on their homepage, they've got an incredible running list of all of the places that you can donate at the state or the community level. So if you're in Austin or Dallas or Fort Worth or El Paso or wherever, you can find out. That's probably where the most immediate need is, just people trying to get connected with resources, people who can literally help them turn off their water, or anything and everything. So
do you think going to texastribune.org, or is that?
Go to texastribune.org, and on their homepage, there's a really prominent link called How to Help, and that's going to be the best place to kind of see which resources are available by community for you to donate or help out.
Okay, that's great information, Amanda. And when, I'm trying to think, Texas is such a huge state. Can you tell us the cities or give us a sense of this? Is it all across Texas?
Yes. So 14 million people are affected, still without access to clean water, who are having to boil water. Every single county in Texas was declared a disaster. And was subject to freezing temperatures. Not a single county of 254 counties has gone untouched by this disaster.
It is
So
wide, and it is a really bad situation. Do you know, are you getting, or did the governor give you any indication of when things, Amanda, might return to normal, or is it just unclear at this point?
it's literally a day to day. I mean, even Wednesday, we were hearing from ERCOT that they couldn't estimate. So it's literally, we're checking in day to day. Let me see if I can pull up what his last estimate was. Oh, yeah. So he was saying 325,000 people still without power due to down lines. And if that's happening at the local level, it might be, those estimates might be more at the local power company. So just checking in, if the ERCOT state level crisis has been resolved, making sure that you're checking in with your local utility and power company for estimates.
Yeah, it's interesting. Someone's just writing, it's hard to get resources, snow and ice. The Texans, aren't used to this, and it's so difficult for them to even, get used to driving on roads these kind of in these kind of weather conditions.
Yeah, I mean, not the funny thing, the sad thing, last Thursday, like the harbinger for all of this, and I remember, I mean, I think I tweeted about this, in Fort Worth, the icy conditions, there were 133 cars involved in a pileup on the interstate in Fort Worth. I think 6 people died from that. And it's because Texas just doesn't have the infrastructure to really be, preparing for this kind of weather. And in terms of salting the roads, I mean, I lived on the East Coast for, more than a decade, and it's just a totally different ball game. Like, yeah. You're out in the snow, because there's just a really rapid response to keeping roads passable and sidewalks passable and safe, for the most part. And Texas just does not have that infrastructure. So if you're not from Texas, you're like, why is this such a big deal? And it's just a big deal because we're set up for really hot summers and, air conditioning to keep people safe and out of the heat, but we're just not set up for these kinds of temperatures. And so, yeah, I think there's clearly going to be some questions about, whether we finally really invest in weatherizing and preparing for these kinds of events if we're going to be seeing more of them.
Well, honestly, Amanda, I can't believe that this won't be a massive wake-up call to state and local officials that this can't happen again. And, I think you're right. I think it probably is going to cost millions and millions of dollars to upgrade.
Yeah. The price tag is going to be epic. And right now, and honestly, we don't even really know. The price tag is one thing. We don't know the extent of the impact on people's lives yet, or health, and also just like the trauma. I think people are already at their breaking points, and I think they're really looking to leadership to step up and deliver results and improve things and connect people to solutions. I think that's, what people are desperate to see.
Yeah. Well, listen, I hope you stay in touch with me. You have my email. If there are other organizations that you feel that pop up, I have very generous followers who really want to help, and we want to continue to bring attention to this issue. I appreciate everyone who has been participating in this conversation. Someone said they were without power for 80 hours, just got it back 3 hours ago. Of course, you think about elderly people, you think about people with small children. It is really, really scary. And Lisa asked me who is getting the 8,000. Oh, what are people getting 8,000? I don't quite understand that. Sorry, I didn't understand her.
Elderly people, people without babies, and people who are immunocompromised, who got thrust, whose pandemic kind of bubbles were burst by necessity this week. That's the other thing that we didn't really talk about, but the state is supposed to be getting 1 million shots into people's arms every week, and they only got 36,000. They couldn't get shipments in that they were expected to get shipped in, and people who had been scheduled to get them this week weren't able to get them. So it's just a huge setback on so many levels.
Yeah, well, I feel so badly for everyone in the state, and just know that we are about them. that we're trying to support them. And I hope that you all come out on the other side of this, and that you can mitigate any more loss of life and, very difficult situations. Wet water just went off in Dallas. Someone is saying pets and animals, people are concerned about.
The long tail impact is still unfolding. I mean, honestly, this is going to be days of trying to figure out how to get people connected to the basic resources that they need to live.
Well, again, let us know if there's anything more we can do, Amanda. Thanks for your hard work. You've been reporting on this for the 19th. You must be exhausted yourself, just kind of keeping up with all the news and getting information out to the people who desperately need it.
Half of our team, more than half of our team, is in Texas, and honestly, the biggest priority has just been making sure everybody's taking care of each other and helping each other get warm and safe. So thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about this story with the country. It is a really important story, and we really appreciate everyone's readership and support. Hopefully you can find some of those resources in a way to help out.
In addition to going to to texastribune.org, I want to make sure people know about the great work you're doing.
Yes. Follow us at 19th News on Instagram. Now that I figured out how to connect with y'all, you can also find us at 19thnews.org. Sign up for our newsletter, 19thnews.org/subscribe. We are really focused on covering the intersection of gender, politics, and policy, and really trying to bring people in from the margins who aren't typically represented in political coverage. Women, communities of color, the LGBTQ community, we really are trying to center those voices. So, yep.
You're doing awesome work. Congratulations on all of that. Safe. And Amanda, thank you for taking time out to talk with us.
Great to talk with you. Thanks so much for having me, Katie.
If you guys like what you see, subscribe right here.